Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? I hope everybody had a great weekend. Saturday was a little iffy with the weather being a little cold, and I guess we didn't get any rain in Milwaukee, but I guess Racine and Kenosha got a lot of rain. But anyways, yesterday was such a beautiful day, and I really hope you guys had a chance to get out. I know we went out for a bunch of walks. I think the dogs are getting a little tired of walking so much, but that's okay. I had a great workout, working on the lawn and everything like that, and so, anyways, today starts a brand new week. It's already, I can't believe this weekend's going to be May already. That's nuts. And unfortunately, this is a kind of a new reality. And I really hope you guys are doing okay. Hope you guys are making the best of situations. But I know that there's hope on the way. A lot of states are opening up now, slowly, gradually opening up. One state that really caught my attention was Minnesota. Obviously, you guys know they're our neighbor to the northwest, so to speak. Northwest. And I hope that that gives you hope that, eventually we're going to get out of this. And I know it's me as I'm looking outside and seeing another sunny day, and that I'm looking forward to getting this past us. And when I see my class again, you guys are going to get tons of hugs. I'm really not a hugger all that much, but in a situation like this, I think it's important to do that. Okay, so we're starting a new book today called Holes. And Stanley Yelnats is under a curse that began with his no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great great grandfather and has since followed generations of Yelnats. Now, Stanley has been unjustly sent to a boys' detention center, Camp Green Lake, where the boys build character by spending all day, every day, digging holes exactly 5 feet wide and 5 feet deep. Now, there is no lake, but there are an awful lot of holes. So we'll see, because the boys are digging holes because the warden is looking for something, but what could be buried? So let's see what happens, okay? All right, so this was requested by Miss Rodriguez, and I haven't read this in a long time, so let's see what happens here. Part 1, you are entering Camp Green Lake. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There once was a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry, flat wasteland. There used to be a town of Green Lake as well. The town shriveled and dried up along with the lake and the people who lived there. During the summer, the daytime temperature hovers around 95 degrees in the shade, if you can find any shade. There's not much shade in a big dry lake. The only trees are 2 old oaks on the eastern edge of the lake. A hammock is stretched between the 2 trees and a log cabin stands behind that. The campers are forbidden to lie in the hammock. It belongs to the warden. The warden owns the shade. Out on the lake, rattlesnakes and scorpions find shade under rocks and in the holes dug by the campers. Here's a good rule to remember about rattlesnakes and scorpions. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. Usually. Being bitten by a scorpion or even a rattlesnake is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You won't die. Usually. Sometimes a camper will try to be bitten by a scorpion or even a small rattlesnake. Then he will get a spender day or 2 recovering in his tent instead of having to dig a hole on the lake. But you don't want to be bitten by a yellow spotted lizard. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You will die a slow and painful death. Always. If you get bitten by a yellow spotted lizard, you might as well go into the shade of the oak tree and lie in the hammock. There is nothing anyone can do to you anymore. Okay. Chapter 2. As you can tell, these chapters are shorter than Bud Not Buddy. Chapter 2. The reader is probably asking, why would anyone go to Camp Green Lake? Well, most campers weren't given a choice. Camp Green Lake is a camp for bad boys. If you take a bad boy and make him dig a hole every day in the hot sun, it will turn him into a good boy. Well, that was what some people thought. Stanley Yelnats was given a choice. The judge said, you may go to jail, or you may go to Camp Green Lake. Well, Stanley was from a poor family. He had never been to camp before. Chapter 3. Stanley Yelnats was the only passenger on the bus, not counting the driver or the guard. The guard sat next to the driver with his seat turned around facing Stanley. A rifle lay across his lap. Stanley was sitting about 10 rows back, handcuffed to his armrest. His backpack lay on the seat next to him. It contained his toothbrush, toothpaste, and a box of stationery his mother had given him. He promised to write her at least once a week. He looked out the window, although there wasn't much to see, mostly fields of hay and cotton. He was on a long bus ride to nowhere. The bus wasn't air-conditioned, and the hot, heavy air was almost as stifling as the handcuffs. Stanley and his parents had tried to pretend that he was just going away to camp for a while, just like rich kids do. When Stanley was younger, he used to play with stuffed animals and pretend the animals were at camp. Camp Fun and Games, he called it. Sometimes he'd have them play soccer with the marble. Other times they run an obstacle course or go bungee jumping off a table tied to broken rubber bands. Now Stanley tried to pretend he was going to Camp Fun and Games. And maybe he'd make some friends, he thought. At least he'd get to swim in the lake. He didn't have any friends at home. He was overweight, and the kids at his middle school often teased him about his size. Even his teachers sometimes made cruel comments without realizing it. On his last day of school, his math teacher, Mrs. Bell, taught ratios. As an example, she chose the heaviest kid in the class and the lightest kid in the class and had them weigh themselves. Stanley weighed 3 times as much as the other boy. Mrs. Bell wrote the ratio on the board 3-1, unaware of how much embarrassment she had caused both of them. Stanley was arrested later that day. He looked at the guard who sat slumped in his seat and wondered if he had fallen asleep. The guard was wearing sunglasses, so Stanley couldn't see his eyes. Stanley was not a bad kid. He was innocent of the crime for which he was convicted. He'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was all because of his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. He smiled. It was a family joke. Whenever anything went wrong, they always blamed Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. Now, supposedly he had a great-great-grandfather who had stolen a pig from a one-legged gypsy, and she put a curse on him and all his descendants. Stanley and his parents didn't believe in curses, of course, but whenever anything went wrong, it felt good to be able to blame someone. Things went wrong a lot. They always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He looked out the window at the vast emptiness. He watched the rise and fall of a telephone wire. In his mind, he could hear his father's gruff voice singing softly to him. If only, the woodpecker sighs. The bark on the tree was just a little bit softer. While the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, he cries to the moon. If only, if only. It was a song his father used to sing to him. The melody was sweet and sad, but Stanley's favorite part was when his father would howl the word moon. The bus hit a small bump and the guard sat up, instantly alert. Stanley's father was an inventor. To be a successful inventor, you need 3 things: intelligence, perseverance, and just a little bit of luck. Stanley's father was smart and had a lot of perseverance. Once he started a project, he would work on it for years, often going days without sleep. He just never had any luck. Every time an experiment failed, Stanley could hear him cursing his dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. Stanley's father was also named Stanley Yelnats. Stanley's father's full name was Stanley Yelnats III. Our Stanley is Stanley Yelnats IV. Everyone in his family had always liked the fact that Stanley Yelnats was spelled the same frontward and backward. So they kept naming their son Stanley. Stanley was an only child, as was every other Stanley Yelnats before him. All of them had something else in common. Despite their awful luck, they always remained hopeful. As Stanley's father liked to say, I learn from failure. But perhaps that was part of the curse as well. If Stanley and his father weren't always hopeful, then it wouldn't hurt so much every time their hopes were crushed. Not every Stanley Yelnats has been a failure, Stanley's mother often pointed out, whenever Stanley or his father became so discouraged that they actually started to believe in the curse. The first Stanley Yelnats, Stanley's great-grandfather, had made a fortune in the stock market. He couldn't have been too unlucky. At such times, she neglected to mention the bad luck that befell the first Stanley Yelnats. He lost his entire fortune when he was moving from New York to California. His stagecoach was robbed by the outlaw, Kissing Kate Barlow. And if it weren't for that, Stanley's family would now be living in a mansion on a beach in California. Instead, they were crammed in a tiny apartment that smelled of burning rubber and foot odor. If only, if only. The apartment smelled the way it did because Stanley's father was trying to invent a way to recycle old sneakers. The first person who finds a use for old sneakers, he said, will be a very rich man. It was this latest project that led to Stanley's arrest. The bus ride became increasingly bumpy because the road was no longer paved. Actually, Stanley had been impressed when he first found out that his great-grandfather was robbed by Kissing Kate Barlow. True, he would have preferred living on the beach in California. But it was still kind of cool to have someone in your family robbed by a famous outlaw. Kate Barlow didn't actually kiss Stanley's great-grandfather. That would have been really cool. But she only kissed the men she killed. Instead, she robbed him and left him stranded in the middle of the desert. He was lucky to have survived, Stanley's mother was quick to point out. The bus was slowing down. The guard grunted as he stretched his arms. "Welcome to Camp Green Lake," said the driver. Stanley looked out the dirty window. He couldn't see a lake, and hardly anything was green. Okay, so we're going to read about 3 or 4 chapters a day. These chapters are pretty short. I like the story. I'm pretty sucked in already. Like I said, I haven't read it in a long time, but it's bringing back some memories now. So anyways, I hope you guys are doing great. Like I said, research assignment today is research something about the Green Bay Packers. I want you to research who wore number 66 for the Green Bay Packers, okay? He's one of my favorite players growing up. I never really saw him play except on old highlights and stuff like that, but the way he played was just amazing, okay? I hope.
How about the new draft pick?
Oh, yeah, and also if you guys want to, you can research the new draft pick too, Jordan Love or A.J. Dillon. I'll leave it up to you guys, one of those 2 players, one of those 3 players. Number 66, Jordan Love, or A.J. Dillon, okay? So tomorrow we'll be uploading chapters 4, 5, and 6, probably tomorrow. You guys should be getting a new mailing packet this week if you have not already gotten one already. Hope you guys are doing great. Miss you guys, love you, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.